Next item, please.
Sorry. Special reports, Dearborn Public Schools.
You think she wouldn't have done this
I
before?
keep forgetting it's not just
Look to me.
it's me. Dearborn Public Schools and Dearborn Police School Resource Officers.
So we're going to have Mr. Mashur come up with Chief Haddad is here, and I know this was part of a request, Trustee McDonald, and it got put back a couple of months when we had some things going on with the weather and other things, I believe. So we appreciate the chief coming here and the awesome partnership we really have with him and his team and his school resource officers. I can't say enough about the great support we have, and you know, when there's things going on, he'll call me direct, and I can call him, and we take care of issues and we work together. So I really, we're very fortunate to have him and the entire staff here at Dearborn Police Department. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening. Congratulations, President Barry.
Thank you, sir.
We have a very unique relationship with our Dearborn schools, and I want to emphasize all the schools, the district schools, and as well as the private schools, religious schools, charter schools. We want to make sure that every single student in our city is kept safe and in an environment where they can succeed. And I can tell you, we've worked on that for the last 12 years. We had 3 school resource officers here just 4 short years ago. We competed for a federal grant. We were able to get it, and we hired 4 additional, provided the city would commit to maintaining them after the grant ran out. So the mayor was not the least bit hesitant to make that commitment. So today we have 7 school resource officers, and I can tell you, about 5 years ago, we went to the FBI headquarters at Washington, D.C. to make a presentation. It was a global conference from all over the world, and they keyed on 2 things: the police relationship with the schools and with the faith-based community. So I sat on a panel the first day, and when it was over, they came up to the mayor, Dr. Maleko, and the rest of us and said, can you guys handle 3 hours tomorrow, because they want to hear about Dearborn. So my point being, as he was congratulating and thanking you for all the hard work, I never for 1 second take for granted how unique and how great this city is, and you're all a part of it. We are definitely different. I entertain a lot of global visits here, about 3 a month, and they always want to come and just get a little piece of information that they can go to some other part of the world and use to be successful. And one of the key things they also key in on is schools, and how do you work with the schools? How can we make our schools safe? I can tell you that the police from Beirut came here, and they wanted to start a community policing there. And I really told the generals, I said, you're going to go in there with that bazooka? Oh yeah, our kids are, literally, our kids are used to that. So I had to break it gently to them. They sent back pictures. They didn't send big macho guys with long guns, but they sent women into the schools. And they put a little placard on their door: 1 team, 1 mission, 1 village. So we made an impression on them. So again, I just want to say that I value the relationship we have with our schools here, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you about Mr. Wooston. We had this K2 epidemic here a few years ago, and I called him real early in the morning. I said, I don't know if we have a chance of this, but I want to send us up to the state and try to outlaw this K2 stuff, you know, that potpourri that people were smoking and kids were killing each other, and our revered teacher got killed by his son. And I said, I want to make sure that my punctuation is right. So he looked at it and he says, Chief, I'd be honored to sign this letter. I said, we all have to amend a couple of the sentences at the tail end of the letter, and he signed it. And within 2 weeks, and they never act that quickly, the state legislators had a letter on the governor's desk. So again, that came out of this city. So we're going to stop at nothing to make sure that our children are safe. And I don't have to tell anybody in this room that schools are a global soft target. And so we visit our schools between 600 and 800 times a month unannounced, in addition to our school resource officers. And no statistic is enough when it comes to supporting our children. But you want me to go on or give it to them?
It's all you.
Okay. I'm going to put the pressure on these guys. And I can also tell you that I always watch your surveys, and you give our school resource officers between 98 and 100 on just about everything. But I look for little things that we can do better, so don't hesitate to let us know if there's anything we can do to keep the schools safer and serve you better. With that, I want to just introduce our officers here. We've got Officer Morandini. He's going to come up and talk very briefly about home visits, opioid addiction, and that's killing our country. And I'll just stop right there with that. Vaping. Kevin Kagans, in another life, he was a dispatcher, and then he came to want to be an officer, and I said, okay. I didn't want to lose him as a dispatcher, but he's done a fine job. He's going to talk about missings and crime in the schools, and then Adil Saleh is going to talk about special events and what we do during Reading Month and others. And let me just say one more thing before I stop. If there's a threat for a school, I usually call Dr. Maleko at about 3 o'clock in the morning. But here's the thing. If you see something on social media, please call us right away, because we usually catch them fairly soon, but oftentimes they pick up legs of their own, and it's hard to tell what's accurate and what's not, because everybody knows about this, supposedly, when they get on social media. They know everything about it. So then our detectives have a horrible job on trying to sift through all that information. And sometimes it's several hours before we catch on, but more times than not, within the first hour, we know about it. And no matter where that threat comes from, we can reach out within 1 hour and touch the person, anywhere on the planet. But we have to get it first. So maybe you can tell our viewers at home that are watching and our parents that if they ever become aware of any kind of threat to a school, the first person they should be calling is the police, and not go on social media with your block. Does anybody hear about this? What do you think about it? Well, then it's really distorted, and it makes our job a lot harder. So school threats, let us deal with them. We're very effective. We got federal partners, got highly trained people, and just let us know right away. Thank you. You're on.
Good afternoon. I promise I will be brief. I was asked to speak about home visits. Just there's a misconception on school resource officers that we're in the schools to write tickets and arrest kids, and that's probably about 0.5% of what we do. So one of the things we do are home visits that aren't really highly publicized, and those can stem from a lot of different things. It could come from a CPS complaint, where we work hand in hand with CPS and our investigators to determine if there's been child abuse or neglect. But they can also stem from a concerned teacher, from truancy. We haven't seen little Bobby in a few days. Can you swing by their house, make sure they and their family are okay? Also, the GSRP teachers go on their home visits, and if they're a little concerned, maybe the family they had a rough spell and they want police assistance, we can go just make sure everybody's safe in a non-threatening type manner. Just make sure that the teachers are safe, and do some follow-up with the students. Yeah, so I told you I'd be brief. Oh, and if anyone ever has any questions, we're clearly always available to answer anything you have regarding the schools.
One thing I wanted to touch on, Officer Morandini said that 50% of what they do is write tickets. It's probably close to 20% of what they do. They educate our population, be it students, parents, staff, whatever it takes to get everybody on the same page. Very often they're coming into volatile or possibly hostile situations, and they bring a calming presence. They don't come in and throw their weight around, or throw their badge around, or throw their guns around, or anything like that. They come in and they try to kind of get everybody on the same page so that we can continually get what we need to get done as far as getting the students, getting parents working with us collaboratively, as opposed to sometimes when things are not going well, and just calming situations. A great part of what they do is education. When you look at SRO officers, school resource officers, they're there to educate the public. They're there to educate the students as far as what's legal, what's not legal, the ramifications, as to how things are progressing and what their behavior is like, and so on. Officer Morandini also mentioned truancy. Sometimes they give students rights to school because students are truant and they're having situations. So they might do a home visit, meet with the child, meet with the parents. We usually have one of our staff members also present, and then they'll even bring them to school just to show that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get kids on the right path. But sorry.
Good evening. I'm Corporal Kevin Kagans. I'm assigned at Fortson. I'm going to touch on what my partner, Corporal Morandini, talked about a little bit when he talked about where we do home visits. In the event we have any of our students that by chance may come up missing, there's no resource that we spare in trying to locate them. We have an entire detective bureau where we do everything from forensically analyzing their social media. We understand a big part of their lives is spent on social media, so that's where we start in our attempt to try to find them. And also, again, reaching out to the family and speaking with them to also get an insight to their child's life to help us try to find them. We take it as far as if necessary. We know their phone is also a big part of their life. If we have to, we ping their phone if we have to track them that way. Another thing, as you can see with some of the stats that were posted, enforcement is a very small part of what we do. As Mr. Short pointed out, a big part of what we do in dealing with crime in the schools is falling in line with the schools and taking a very restorative practice and reaching out to our youth. We get a lot of training in youth mental health, which helps us, again, reach out to them in a manner to help them understand what their role is eventually going to be in society and what impact a negative law enforcement contact can have on their life. We always believe none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, and our role is to give them an opportunity to correct that mistake. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Corporal Del Sala, and been with the department for about 7 years now. Seen a lot of you guys around. We do fun stuff too. You know, we do a lot of school events. You know, whether it's like Reading Month, you know, special events like we just had a couple weeks ago. We had the police and firefighters versus the Salina staff.
Just for the record, Salina won.
Well, it's the firefighters' fault.
I was Team Salina.
It wasn't our fault. We had too many firefighters.
Now that,
They're under the bus now, huh?
Chief Murray isn't gonna take kindly to that.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
You know this is live on TV.
Oh, is it? Oh, I thought this was, okay, my bad. Disregard everything I just said. Well, like I said, we do a lot of these events because, I mean, it's fun for us too. I mean, we have fun doing these things, but it also like shows that, hey, we're not here out to get everybody. We're not here to jam everybody up with tickets. I mean, you know, sometimes they're due, but that's not what we're there primarily for. So if there's any, you know, schools or anything like that, you know, like us at certain events, I mean, we'd love to be there. I mean, we can't be at every place at every time. I know a lot of times one school want me here and another school want me there, and I can't do them both. But I mean, we try our best to do as much as we can. And like Officer Morandini and Kevin said, I mean, you guys could get a hold of us anytime if you guys need anything. All right.
Any questions? Trustee Petchakov?
Okay, I have a lot of conversations with the chief over the years, and I also wear another hat as president of the Federation of Neighborhood Associations. So I have a lot of interaction with the community in a variety of ways. We have a lot of conversation over the years about student drivers in the community, and also it has become concerning about behavior of students after school, the use of fireworks during the summertime illegally with students, a variety of things that are driven by the age of the student, but not necessarily on school property at the time. Is there a way, we've had this conversation over the years, we've had it with the fire chief as well, about how we can utilize school assemblies to help give a better education, since that's part of your role and responsibility, for those kinds of safety issues that occur outside of the school, such as the driving issues with the teenage crowd and or the younger students who are illegally using fireworks and causing damage in the neighborhoods, and the whole variety of issues. Has there been a conversation of attempting to put together some kind of, I did speak with somebody, a deputy fire marshal, and she had talked about having something that she was trying to put together, but I think it never really materialized because there was a lot of work involved with it.
So I'll tell you, one of the things we do at the beginning of the school year, we're usually, each of us are invited out to our respective high schools where the administration gives us a chance to speak to the students. And that's one of the things we talk about. One of the things the chief does for the summertime, we're assigned in the neighborhoods and we're assigned to the parks where we go out in the daytime. In the evening, this evening, we reach out to the youth and we explain things. As I tell my Fortune students, I'm always around. You do something after school, I'm gonna know about it. If the complaint is made, we urge all residents and parents, if you have an issue, call it in. And then the chief deploys us in those areas where we have the most complaints. But that information is given to them. We hold them accountable. We tell them you're not only accountable in school, but you're accountable outside of school. I mean, so we do have means in place from traffic enforcement on down, even to fireworks enforcement, there's zero tolerance. I mean, so they understand what the consequence is going to be when they go outside of how we explain things to them. So we do have plans in place. Again, we encourage people that if you see something, pick up the phone and call us. We do address it.
Trustee McDonald?
I just want to say, Chief, thank you so much, and your officers for what you do. It's so important. I think it brings a lot of positive energy to our school and our community. One thing I didn't hear you say, but I know because I've seen it in action, you also build really positive relationships with the students and the staffs in our school and community leaders. I've seen you in parks doing a pick-up basketball game with students, things like that. And I think those relationships are key to making this a great community. So thank you for that and all that you do. I think you're a tremendous asset to our schools and our community as well.
Trustee Thorpe?
Echoing some of the things that Trustee McDonald said, we get reports of all different types of activities that are happening in the schools, and anytime there is a report where there's assistance requested for any of the school resource officers, it seems like they're either on site as the event is going on or that they are there very quickly. So the response time is amazing. Thank you for that one. And anything that you can do to help us with the always present issue of pick up and drop off times.
Yes.
We always appreciate any assistance, especially at the beginning of the school year, the bad weather days. Thank you for that.
Trustee Moser?
Yeah, I'd like to echo my colleagues as well. Thank you, Chief, and to the women and men in blue for everything that they do in our city and keeping our schools safe. And as we said, we have an amazing partnership that we cherish, and we thank you very much for. One thing that I'd like to mention about cyber activity with our students, and unfortunately, sometimes in the heat of moments, we teenagers now write a lot of things online, and they get, unfortunately, online is a totally different world. There's so many strangers, so many people that you talk to that you don't know where they at and what they can do for you. And unfortunately, for the past few days, I've been very involved with the police as well to locate a 14-year-old who is currently still missing and endangered. She's not a Dearborn School student. She does have, obviously, her family is in Dearborn, and we're praying that she's located safely and brought back to her community, to her mother, who is longing for her to reunite with her. So it's been very, very tough, but we thank and love our police and our detectives for helping us on this case. It's so very, very stressful for the family. I can't imagine, and I can't even explain how stressful this has been for them. So I ask everybody just for their prayers, and hopefully, if anybody has any information about this case, about Rima Saidi, please call Dearborn Police and let them know, because locating her safely is the most important thing now for us and for the entire community. The other thing about what Trustee Petrikov mentioned about driving, it's been a problem, and I think the chief recognizes that. And I call on the student leaders also to address this issue with the Student Advisory Council, especially during graduation. It's not worth it. Some people have really passed away, and a lot of people have memories of people who were with us and no longer with us. It's not worth it to drive your muscle car around and show your friends that you're an amazing driver. It's not worth it to lose a life. You lose your life or lose somebody's life. So please be careful, especially for the parents. Please talk to your children about the importance of being responsible drivers. This will go on your record for life if you get a misdemeanor or if you get a huge violation, or God forbid, something happens and you pretty much destroy a family. So that car is a weapon, and if wherever you move it, whether you're on your cell phone or whether you're talking or you're speeding, it's not worth it. I just leave it at that. So, Chief and officers, thank you once again, and to all of your colleagues as well.
Trustee Petrikov?
Chief, would you like to remind everybody also about the ability for families to sign up if they have a special needs person within their home that they would like the police to be aware of in case they have to come and deal with a problem, so that there's some special situations that they can handle differently?
Thank you for that. We call it the Special Needs Register, and they can go right online and sign up. We're asking people that might have a special needs youngster, anybody that's autistic, somebody that maybe has a hearing or a sight issue. We go so far as to say if you have somebody that's slowing down, lacking mobility, and can't get to the door on time.
Is a drug addict?
And I've even told them drug addicts or alcoholics, we're not there to spy on you or get you in trouble, but we may only have one chance to save someone's life. And if the officers knock at the door or fire rescue knocks at the door and they don't get an answer, it just might be the seconds they need to save a life. So I can give you a bunch of stories. I can tell you it works for the people that have signed up. But again, the more you tell us up front, the better we're going to be able to save you, serve you, and respond to your calls. So I would just ask them to sign up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Mead?
Just like to thank you very much for your service to all our students. And I have a specific question for you, Chief.
Okay.
Are those handcuffs on your tie?
They are.
What's the
significance? So, somewhere about 47 years ago, my mom gave them to me for Christmas on my first year on the job. So that's the significance, really.
It's good luck charm.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good.
Well, Chief, I think it's unanimous. We all appreciate the partnership with the Dearborn Police, Dearborn's finest. I am very proud of what they do on a daily basis. So thank you. They have a great deal. They have a great leader. And thank you for your service, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Statewide shortages, employee compensation and retention, Dr. Glenn Maleko, Ms. Maysam Alibazi, Mr. Tom Wall.
I think Mason's going to lead this, but then Tom and or Rob are there if necessary.
Yeah.
Try to go through this.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good evening. Nice to see everyone. Staff shortages, staff recruitment, and employee compensation.
As she's getting that ready there, I just wanted to mention too, this is a hot topic at all of the superintendent association meetings. It's been going on for a long time, and it came up again in December at both my state MASA superintendent meeting and at the county. And literally, it was the longest discussion among superintendents, especially in areas of need. In fact, right now, there's some legislation, and they're trying to allow flexibility with special ed certifications and other things. And I know Mason's going to hit on
I'll
some.
touch on that, yeah. So this survey was taken by MESA, which is the Michigan Association of Superintendent and Administrators. And these responses are as of September 9th, 2019, so this past September. As you can imagine, the numbers do change daily, but this was the most recent data that I had through the MESA survey for all the districts, for 297 districts throughout Michigan. And the first question was, do you have any vacant classroom positions? 178 districts, which is 60% of the districts that took the survey, responded that they did have vacancies, and 40% said they did not. How many teachers' vacancies do you have as of 9/9, same date? All this information is on the same date. And so one district said they had 15 vacancies. One district had 14, one had 13, and it goes all the way down Just 72 districts only had 1 vacancy, 49 districts had 2 vacancies. But as you go through, the pattern is that all the districts had a vacancy or more. And on this chart, you'll see how many vacancies you have by level. And so the bottom bar, the darker blue, is for Dearborn. I'm not getting the little floater on there, hang on. So there's about 200, I'm going to estimate the numbers because I thought I had the numbers in front of me, but I don't. 111 high schools, 111 districts have high schools with vacancies. And for Dearborn, they have a total of, the high school vacancies are over 200. For Dearborn schools, we had 5 at this time, 5 high school vacancies. The time of the survey, we had in 64 districts, there was about 110 vacancies, and Dearborn also had about 5. Elementary, in 110 districts, there were about 150 vacancies, and we had about a total of 5. So the 150 in the light blue is the total number of vacancies for that level. What subjects are the vacancies? You could just take a look at that. You'll see special ed has 112 districts have vacancies in special ed. I was a little surprised to see that English language arts had 27 districts with vacancies because typically math and science, 23 districts had math, 21 districts had sciences. Those are the other very hard to fill areas. But clearly special ed was a glaring factor here. Other is like CTE courses, home economic courses, more specialized courses falls under the other category. So special ed, I wasn't surprised. And then math and science and even now language arts has become, because in the past you could find language arts and social studies, but we're finding that even that is becoming scarcer. Special ed programs, just take a glance. We have one of the largest special ed departments throughout the county. Depending on how you look at the programs, we could be the 4th largest or we could be the 2nd largest in the county. Detroit is always number 1. They are the largest district, so they always exceed us as far as size goes. Currently, the special ed department has a total of 257 staff members. 26% or 68 staff members are funded on Act 18, which is county-funded staff. And you'll see here that, I'll get into a little more detail in just a second, but we have 10 classrooms that are mild or mild cognitively impaired. 5 ASD classrooms, we have 17, which was a huge jump since 2016. We have one of the largest ASD programs. And ASD teacher certification is absolutely one of the most difficult to find. Greatest educator shortage, and the reason we say educator shortage is because it's not only our special ed teachers that we're struggling to find, but administrators and also paraprofessionals. We continue to have vacancies. I'm happy to say, because we get a report every morning, that the number of vacancies each day has gone from daily 12 parapro positions that are vacant down to like 3 or 4, which is always a relief. That's actually, I'm paying more attention to that because that is a really hard to fill area.
Mason, can I comment on
Sure.
that too? 2 things. One is, yeah, they're also asking for flexibility with certification for administrators at the state level. That was discussed. Secondly, I met with Al Arini just before, I think it was the day before Christmas Eve, and he talked about the positive progress, at least on the non-instructional side, that has been made within the department as far as filling and the positions and the communication with department administrators. And so he was very pleased with the progress in that department. So I thought I'd mention that.
So
He actually said he's going to send me an email.
Yeah, although paraprofessionals are working in the classroom side by side with teachers, they are considered part of the non-instructional staff and part of the DFSC union, and that's why Dr. Maleka was referencing Al Arini, the president of DFSC. I'm going to just highlight a few points on this, is that I just talked about ASD being a critical shortage area. I think it's really important to note that in Dearborn, we went from 7 classrooms in 2016 to currently 17 classrooms. So we jumped rapidly, and filling those positions have been an ongoing struggle, an uphill battle. We've put some things in place, which I'll touch on, that has helped with recruiting and has helped with retention. However, we continue to work really closely with staff, and we have some things in mind to roll out to continue to do what we can for employee retention as well. So the state has implemented a rule waiver in response to the ASD shortage. So they're putting rules in place because they recognize that there's a shortage across the state. And then 10 out of our 17 teachers are currently working to obtain their ASD certification. And so then what happens is if they voluntarily, our special ed teachers say, hey, I'll get the ASD certification, and they move out of their special ed position, then that creates a shortage in other special ed areas. Now, we totally appreciate when our staff does that. But at the same time, it's also, you know, you're taking from here to help this area, and then we struggle in another area. Since 2016-17, in 2016-17, we had 22 vacancies in special ed. While we will never be satisfied with any vacancies, we're excited that it is now 3.5% of vacancies. So that went from 2016-17, we had 22% to currently 3.5% in special ed. It was a relief, to be honest with you, because when you're day in and day out and you're like, oh, and I know that Mr. Asale in the special ed department and the other teachers feel it as well, because when there's vacancies, it weighs more on them. They end up carrying more of the weight, and same thing with the paraprofessionals as well, and we recognize that. This is just a quick snapshot of, and these are estimated numbers, so these numbers are a total of 1,030 new hires over the last 5 years, and you'll see the different classifications across the top. For DFT, the teacher union, we had 590 new hires, transportation 16, clerical, I can't see what that total is. I'll go back to that one. It was more than 4. Food service, 51. We started the school year out with about 40 vacancies in food service. Thankful for the board approval to add the special projects manager and HR position, because Ms. Nada Alamadine has been working very closely with Rob Cederlin and Ruth Bankhead, also directors in HR, to do some pretty assertive recruiting from our community. They had 6 job fairs at our school buildings, and we had an enormous response, a really positive response from our community, and that's really what we've been wanting to see. Is we know they're there, we just got to get to them, and we've got to make sure that we can make a good match. If they don't have transportation, getting them a location closest to their home, things like that.
Can I mention too, when you look at the 590 teachers, we have about just under 1,500 in the DFT. So if you look at the percentage of staff that are within their first 5 years, it's huge within our district. So that brings in a lot of need for training and other professional development and things. So just, and when we're going into buildings for school improvement visits, we also recognize that as well.
So some of the themes from that same MESA survey, they were nothing that was shocking to us, but it was in somewhat a relief, although we will never stop reflecting and we'll never stop our process for continuous improvement. But I was relieved when I read that quantity and quality of applicants was a glaring concern that districts across the state of Michigan expressed in this survey. Significant area concerns regarding the shortage in other staffing areas, which we also are feeling, but since we are tapping into the community, like I said, we're pleasantly filling those positions, some of them. The parapros, counselors, nurses, short and long-term subs. So across districts in Michigan, this was an area that was stated repeatedly on the survey of a serious area of concern, which we are feeling. Another significant concern is that regarding teachers leaving districts for other districts with minimal to no notice to the current district that they're at. Dr. Maleko tried very hard to advocate with the other Wayne County superintendents in the past and asked them to do, there was I think it was called like a gentleman's rule or something like that in the past, where basically you don't let the teacher start until a semester or until the end of the school year, so it's least disruptive for students. And unfortunately, he was able to get all the superintendents to agree on that practice, because we were honoring it, but then what we found is that we were honoring it and everyone else wasn't.
Everybody was taking
Yeah.
advantage of
Some,
our.
some were and some were. you
Somewhere
know,
and
But we
somewhere.
were still professional, and it goes back to Brian Whiston's time.
Yeah.
The thing that I can just tell you, and this came up at our meeting, and I'm just gonna jump on this
Mm-hmm.
point with the superintendents. It comes up at every monthly meeting I have at Wayne County. It's almost like a headhunting operation. When we got hired years ago, you tended to stay in your district for many years. Now what's happening is you have teachers that are literally, they're jumping, especially in these high needs areas, because they realize with pay and other things. So that's what's going on right now. I've never seen it in my 24 years the way it is right now, in multiple areas where teachers are jumping around, and that's why we've had to do some things in the contract.
Trustee Moses?
I was just gonna say,
I'm
this
sorry.
is
It's
all
not my
over.
role.
I mean, we're in a very strong economy, and even in the field of IT, headhunting is a major concern. I mean, Beaumont right now, by the way, is offering employees like myself bonuses if we refer any nurses. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. And in IT, I mean, they're paying top dollar for talent, and it is what it is. It's we have to, as a district, reflect on how do we retain our best and brightest, obviously, and making sure that we don't lose talent to other districts. I hate that when that happens. I hate losing great folks in our district. So whatever we can do to retain them, obviously. All I have is to thank them and appreciate them and for their service and to our district. But whatever we can do to making sure that they're really happy here, they're really content, and is something that I look forward to see.
We done with the report, or?
Oh, no, a couple more slides.
Okay.
Oh,
But
go
I'll
ahead.
speed
I'm
up
sorry
though.
to interrupt.
No,
I thought
no,
we were done.
Please do. No, please do. So that is, Trustee Moses, that is pretty much what I was, it was Dr. Maleko that said it, but that it was perceived unintended environment of competition between districts is happening now. And so you feel the competition, and in your meetings with the HR people from the other districts, you're all like, well, you took how many people from me, and you took, everyone's saying it to each other. And so we know that it's no longer that you mirror your district like when I was hired. Educator shortage initiative, I'm working on goal 2. I'm on that committee for the MESA, and Dr. Chokol is on one of the other goals. I can't remember which one, but these are the goal initiatives that MESA is facilitating. I'll talk about goal 2 because that's what I'm working on and I'm most familiar with, but I'll focus on, there's 3 strategies they're working on. The third one is what our last conference call was about. Fortunately, we can do it over the phone. I don't have to drive to Lansing every time. But it was all about working with the Michigan Department of Education to improve the pathways for special ed certifications, endorsements, as it's a common problem that's happening. And so I'm happy that we're talking about it, and I'm happy that it's being talked about at the state level as well. Dearborn recruitment efforts, we had special ed partial tuition reimbursement. This has been going on for about 4 years. Special ed ASD bonuses for our ASD teachers. 25 special ed salary schedule placements, which is a no cap. That means they come to us, they're a new hire, and they can show us evidence of X number of years of experience teaching special ed. They can show us their last paycheck stub to confirm what they were earning, and we have 25 positions that we can do that with. That was negotiated with the DFT. And we do appreciate our relationship with the DFT because they feel the need, and even though we don't always agree, we have a great working partnership for our kids. Henry Ford Early College Program for Education, growing our own, nothing better than having our own students come back and teach in our schools. Nothing makes me happier. I saw a student of mine that's a teacher in the district just today. Annual education job fairs at universities. We have a lot of partnerships, mock interviews, capstone projects. That's all part of our recruiting because that's where we see the brightest and the best of the students that are in education at this time. Local job fairs I talked about earlier. Personalized group meeting held for the food service and noon hour supervisors to complete paperwork, help them with their application, answer questions, really have some face-to-face time with some of our non-instructional staff. New online testing, you get immediate test results in HR now, And I have to thank Nada Alameddine for that push, because she's all technology, and it's more efficient. The applicants know if they passed or not, and then they could schedule a retake if they didn't pass right away. DFT contract, 99% approval. At the time, we were top 5 salary schedules in Wayne County, and I'll touch on that in just a second. We offer a $1,200 incentive. It's not on here, but we do have one of the lowest benefit costs for health insurance, which sometimes when people think they're getting more money in another district, they don't know the hidden costs that are going to come in their monthly contribution, that because our entire district is part of the DSHEP, I hope I said it in the right order, DSHEP program, we get better rates of health insurance. We also are bringing the testing here for our paraprofessionals. So in the past, they'd have to drive to, like, I don't know, somewhere about Van Buren. They'd have to drive to Van Buren to take the test. We're now offering that same test here in the boardroom. Additional steps on the scale for hard-to-fill positions in our non-instructional positions, and a lot of other wonderful things that take time, but we're definitely starting to feel like we're getting a pool. Long-term teacher recruitment efforts, we have a partnership with Wayne State. We've had these partnerships for quite some time. This is a true project. This is a program that Wayne State got a grant for, and they asked us if we wanted to participate, and we jumped all over it, us in Detroit. And basically, it's recruiting teachers, adults that are ready in a profession that want teaching to be their second career, and it's for science, technology, education, and math teachers. This is over a 5-year program, but we're really excited that we had the opportunity to be a part of this. So this is our teacher salary schedule. This data was collected in 2017 and 18. Since then, at the time, we were like 4th, bachelor's of 4th. Sorry, I was supposed to be brief. Bachelor's, we're now 2nd in the county. That's, again, I don't know when their contracts changed. So theirs could have gone up, they could have varied a little bit, but we're between 2nd and 4th place with the highest salary for bachelors. For bachelors, maximum on bachelor, we're now 3rd. And going by the current year, we're 4th for the master's maximum, so master's. And then the highest degree max, we're 2nd. So we definitely became more competitive after we had contracts negotiations. And we really looked at what were other districts paying and what were our weak spots. And the starting pay was one of our weak spots. You see in 17-18, it was $36,000. It's now $43,480. And I'll have Tom Wall, Executive Director of Business Services, please.
And I'll even be briefer than Mason. So I give credit to the Board of Education administration. 2 years ago, we recognized this day was coming, where the marketplace was changing rapidly and there was a shortage. So 2 years ago, we made an investment when we settled the contracts for 5 years with most of the unions, and we invested $23 million into actual salary compensation and about $30 million in total benefits to get us where Mason was talking about, higher up on the scale in the area, so we would attract the higher talent for our students and recognizing the need for our students. So that's what this screen is basically breaking it down. Now, all the money isn't paid out of the general fund. You know, it's spread out across all the funds, so it becomes more affordable for us. And that's why we were even able to make this kind of an investment when we weren't sure what the revenue stream was going to be 2 years ago. So it was a commitment on the district to make sure that we're there for our staff and give them the best that we could. And the last one is just showing that the blue line here shows you our revenue stream is not cut up or even close to being the CPI standards for the last 25 years. And our red stream, our red line, is our salary compensation. As you're well aware of, back in 2009-10, we had that big drop in our foundation allowance. And unfortunately, we as a district could not afford this, so the district staff stepped forward and helped the district out by taking a reduction in their salary at that time. But with the last contract in place, that we're eventually going to exceed that former dollar value and actually keep moving forward. So this is kind of just showing you where we're at. And the yellow line is the retirement cost, which is always a big item for us in public schools. We hard to compete with the public industry when they don't pay benefits like we do for retirement. And so even though in the old days that used to be a big attractor for us to attract people to schools because of the benefits, but unfortunately the benefits are controlled by the state, and that's why we're kind of held kind of hostage on that. But hopefully at some point, that rate will go down when the unfunded liability gets caught up with the actual funding. And we'll see that go down and we'll actually have more money to invest back into staff.
Trustee Thorpe?
You mentioned that we went from having, for ASD classrooms, from having 7, I think, 2016 to 17 this year. What do we believe the increase is due to? Is there more students in that program? Do we have more teachers that can teach it? How do we get there?
Mr. Saley's coming.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. You know, that's a great question. ASD's probably seen the largest increase of any area of disability. You know, I believe we do have the specific data. I shared it in a board brief a few months ago, but I believe if you go back to like 5 or 6 years, you almost see a 200 or 300% increase in autism. It's an issue not only locally here in Dearborn. I know it's impacting county and statewide right now. Another thing with ASD, which we have to understand, is per the MARS rules, the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Ed, you can only have 7 students in the classroom. So, you know, when you look at ratios, 1 to 7, you're ultimately going to need more teachers.
Thanks.
Trustee Petrikov?
Well, and just to answer that, nationally, they are, the parameters to identify autism spectrum have changed. And so I think that students who would before have had an IEP for emotional impairment or something like that have now been identified as autistic, which comes with a whole different set of rules. So I think that's part of why we've also seen an increase in it. My question, one of them was for special ed actually, was about if we're having difficulty with finding the normal parapros and teachers to teach it, what are we doing? And I already know we struggle with the substitute teaching pool as well. How do we fill for just substitutes in the special education department?
So we've been trying to be very creative within the special education pool. Honestly, something that we have been doing is we've been taking some of our teacher leaders or our teacher consultants, and we've asked them to go back into the classroom because we want to make sure that our students are being provided with some of the services. Unfortunately, we've also had to contract specific teachers too in the past. You know, that's definitely a route we don't want to go. We want to hire our own, but we've had other options as well to where we've tried to really mediate the situation or at least remedy the situation. But the bottom line is I think right now, you know, we do have an aggressive plan moving forward. You know, I know Mesa mentioned, or Miss Ali Bazzi, I'm sorry, mentioned the partnership with the colleges and universities, where actually every semester we're almost placing 7 or 8 interns within our district in special education, who in turn, actually with Wayne State, they're allowing us to do some early hiring as well, and that's helped us tremendously too.
And you feel that they're sufficiently trained at that point?
Well, you know, they don't have the
classrooms?
experience, but I think the benefit is that they're in our district for that amount of time actually teaching the day-to-day, and they're allowed to go to a lot of our professional development, so on and so forth. For autism specifically, we also have an autism coach that'll work closely with teachers as well to provide them some of that training.
Okay. My next question is about the headhunting or poaching or whatever you want to call it and how you want to determine it. A lot of our, and that's why I'm looking at this last slide with the foundation allowance versus the, you know, and the contracts that we've recently negotiated. I'm curious, this is more just a thought than it is a real question, but how do the surrounding communities who are headhunting our employees, a lot of them have to be struggling financially because we're one of the few districts that continue to maintain our student population to have that foundation balance in our bank account. And I know a lot of the surrounding communities are really struggling to have the student population. How are they managing to come out ahead when it comes to paying a higher, to attract some of our staff?
Well, not to kind of beat the bush around it, but one of the things is, if you look at most of the districts around us, they have done bond issues to handle their building cost. And so they're basically borrowing ahead and having the taxpayers pay that through millage. And so therefore, their general fund is now set aside more
because
for compensation.
They're using other monies to pay for
we're
things.
anywhere from
Yes.
$2 to
All
$5
right.
million annually for just the building aspects. And if you free that up, it could allow us to do much more
So,
of the
not to beat it, but when
compensation side.
everybody kept telling us that our millage solution, they wanted to see it go to teachers' pay, it actually would have been going to teachers' pay
Correct.
because that money would have been kept in the general fund to pay our staff and avoid having to go into putting a new roof on a building.
Right, I'm sure that's one aspect, but as Mr. Asali said, that if there is such a need, they're gonna pay higher premium for those teachers like special ed, and they'll pay a high bonus just to attract them to get into it, even though they don't have the same support services we might have in Dearborn. But, you know, if they're desperate, they'll pay the higher prices.
All right.
Some of the districts, if I could just comment too, like you know, and I'm not going to mention which districts, but some superintendents that are losing are frustrated because they are stuck in what you said with the financial and their scale. And I want to commend Jane and the DFT and Chris Pryor for working with us on some of those things, because now I get emails and it has to go through me. So there's a check and balance, but I'm able to allow the higher level step scales. Some of those districts jumped on it sooner. So we got into a point where we're very competitive. But I can tell you, some of my colleagues, they're very frustrated. The ones that are losing teachers and have a lot of these vacancies because they're not able to retain, and some of them are moving out of their districts. So we've done a pretty good job by changing a lot of and that's why I think Mr. Wall and the board approved the last contract. That was important because we need to retain in some of that compensation. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be competitive with the other districts. The other one is the flexibility, and again, thank you, Jane, for, you know, Chris had worked prior to that of just recognizing that there's a greater need in some of these high needs positions, so we appreciate that.
But it's definitely a dance that we
Yeah,
do
it
with
is.
with these kinds of intangibles that people don't recognize, but that we're actually managing very well considering the size of our district, I think.
And if I can just add to that, the one reason, and I know, is because the reason we're in this though is because, and there's data that actually came from Superintendent Winston a couple of years ago, showing how the pool in Michigan has shrunk. So there's less here, so everyone's competing over the smaller pool. And I remember when I was principal well over a decade ago, there were multiple applicants I could choose from, and no longer is that the case.
Trustee Moser, question?
Yeah, I just, it's more of a comment here and a concern for the statewide funding of public education. We talk, Mr. Asili, you just said, you know, 200% increase in autism cases over the past, but how much did we get funding for support staff, for psychologists, for social workers?
Nurses.
My son's school has a social worker who's there only half-time, and that's not enough. And that's not fair for our children. And I say that a lot of people just focus more on teachers, but you know, those psychologists, those social workers, psychiatrists that we have on staff, those are as important as our teachers for our students. The well-being of our students is very, very important. And in order to hand this product of a successful, healthy student at the end, we must have a social worker on staff. We must have a support staff who are fully funded. So half funding, you know, we're becoming very creative of funding, and I'm not saying this is the district's fault. It's pretty much, we have very little money to, if we have unlimited amount of money, we definitely want to hire a full-time social worker for the school. We want to hire a full-time psychologist who's there to be there for our students, especially in those very tough times. So the problems have gotten bigger, and we have more cases. We have more special students than ever. We have students who are not designated special students, but they have so many more problems, but the funding kept on decreasing, and it's sad for when people talk about funding for public education, and obviously that's why I was very, very emotional last year about the bond, because I know that if we don't have this money to take care of our resources, then we will have to take this money that we're paying right now, our social workers and our staff and our teachers, and dedicate it to the buildings. So for people who are saying that this district or public education is well-funded, I look at them and I'll be like, it's almost laughable to really respond to them. But that's why we, as a district, the state of Michigan, really need to fund public education we're unfortunately the dead last in funding public education in the last 50 years or 40 years, and that's a sad reality. But I hope things will change in the future. We have an election coming up, so I would welcome people to ask candidates who are running for any public office how do they view public education, and do they support public education, and do they support increasing of funding, or at least return to the same funding that we used to get in the past, when we have now even bigger problems and Dearborn has more students. So it's I just call for everybody to really reflect on this. So thank you, Trustee Berry, for your
Trustee
time.
Wayne?
Yeah, I'm going to say this pretty much the same things. Dr. Maleko, I thank you and all of the staff for the valiant efforts that you've made, but the reality is, let's put it on the table, we've had, since the 1980s, when the concept came that greed is good, we haven't valued public education, we haven't valued public service, we've valued making money. So as a result of privatization, which our state leads in, we have more and more privatization, less and less salary. There's so many clawbacks on pensions, on benefits. Most young people do not want to go into education, and that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. There's going to be teacher, administrator shortages from now on out until we change our attitude about education. It's one of the most important things that we do. So, and we're focusing on what we're doing here in Dearborn or what Michigan is doing. This is everywhere. Every single state has the same issues. The only question is to what degree. I assume the same thing, or possibly even worse, is happening at charter schools, because public schools have been the place that teachers want to go to. Charter schools, because of their terrible working conditions, qualified teachers don't stay there. And let's put the other reality on the table too. Less pension, less health care, less salaries, more difficult conditions. We have more students that are classified as special ed. We have more students struggling with life traumas, opioid crises, parents and people that are, we have to train our teachers now to stop fights. Who wants to work under these conditions? This is a sad thing, and we need to change this, as Trustee Moseb said. One way to do that, of course, will be in the election, and everybody needs to be talking about where do you stand on public education. Are you going to divert public money to private profit? If that's it, that shows what you value. Do you value public education?
Well
so,
said.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the report.
Mm.